My beloved child, God says, there is a reason this message found you at this exact moment. Something changed in the heart of the person connected to you, and the strange part is that you may not even realize that you were the reason behind it. For a long time, your soulmate carried emotions they couldn't explain. They had moments when they felt empty, moments when they questioned love, moments when they wondered if they would ever feel genuinely happy again. They learned how to smile while hiding what was happening inside. They became good at pretending everything was fine. But recently, something shifted. Their heart became lighter. Their mind became calmer. And somehow, without you forcing anything, chasing them, or demanding an answer, you did something that finally reached a place inside them that nobody else could reach. Maybe you stepped back. Maybe you stopped trying to prove your worth. Maybe you finally chose yourself. Maybe you forgave something you never received an apology for. Or maybe you simply continued living your life even while a part of your heart was still waiting for them. Whatever it was, your soulmate noticed the energy of that change. They may not have said anything, but they felt it. And that is why their happiness has become different. Lately, they are not happy because everything around them suddenly became perfect. They are happy because something inside them finally stopped fighting. They realized that the connection they tried to ignore was still alive. They realized that losing access to you did not erase what they felt for you. In fact, distance made them understand it more clearly. There was a moment recently when your soulmate thought about you unexpectedly. It may have happened while they were driving, lying in bed, working, listening to a song, or simply sitting alone with their thoughts. Your memory appeared without warning. And instead of feeling sadness, they smiled. That smile was different. It carried relief. It carried warmth. It carried the realization that someone once made their heart feel safe. They remembered your voice. They remembered the way you looked at them. They remembered something small you probably forgot completely, but they never did. And suddenly they understood something important: you were never asking them to become someone else. You were simply asking them to be honest about what they already felt. For years, they may have searched for happiness in places that could never give it to them. They tried distractions. They tried new people. They tried staying busy. They tried convincing themselves that moving on was easier. But none of those things could silence the question inside their heart: what if I let the right person go? That question became louder recently. And this time, they didn't run from it. They faced it. Your soulmate has been thinking about the choices they made, the moments they missed, and the things they never said. They are beginning to understand that sometimes losing someone doesn't happen when they walk away. Sometimes you lose someone when you fail to recognize their value while they are still standing beside you. And your soulmate knows there were moments when they didn't recognize yours. That realization has changed them. They are becoming more emotionally honest. They are becoming less interested in pretending. They don't want another connection that looks perfect from the outside but feels empty inside. They want something real. Something peaceful. Something where they don't have to constantly hide their emotions. And when they think about that kind of love, your face keeps appearing in their mind. But here's the part you may not expect. Your soulmate's happiness is connected to something you finally did for yourself. You stopped carrying the entire connection alone. You stopped begging the universe for signs every second. You stopped trying to control the timing. You started healing. You started becoming comfortable with your own presence. You started realizing that your worth doesn't depend on whether someone chooses you immediately. And that transformation changed the entire dynamic. When you stopped chasing, they had space to feel. When you stopped explaining, they had space to understand. When you stopped forcing the connection, they finally had to confront what existed naturally between you. And that is why they feel happier now. Not because they have forgotten you, but because they are finally allowing themselves to acknowledge you. There is a very specific memory your soulmate keeps returning to. It may seem insignificant to you, but to them, it represents something much deeper. Maybe it was the first time you laughed together. Maybe it was a conversation that lasted longer than expected. Maybe it was the way you looked at them when they were struggling. Maybe you said something simple like, "You don't have to pretend with me." And those words stayed. At the time, they may have acted like they didn't care. But deep down, they remembered. They remembered because very few people made them feel seen without demanding anything in return. You did. And now they are beginning to understand the value of that. Your soulmate may also be experiencing a strange sense of peace lately. Things that used to bother them don't have the same power anymore. Situations that once made them anxious are becoming easier to handle. And they don't completely understand why. But part of that peace comes from finally accepting their own truth. They care about you. They miss you. They wonder about you. And they are no longer ashamed of those feelings. There may have been a period when they tried to convince themselves that they were happier without you. But privately, they knew something was missing. They could have everything around them and still feel emotionally disconnected. Then something happened. Perhaps they saw someone who reminded them of you. Perhaps they heard your name unexpectedly. Perhaps someone mentioned a place, song, phrase, or memory connected to you. And suddenly, the emotional wall they built began to crack. They realized that their heart had never truly moved on. It had simply learned how to stay quiet. And now that silence is ending. Your soulmate is also recognizing the difference between comfort and genuine happiness. They may have had people around them before, but being surrounded by people is not the same as feeling understood. They may have laughed with others, gone out, celebrated, traveled, or started new routines. But there was still a part of them that felt unseen. With you, something felt different. You reached their emotional world. You noticed things they never said. You understood moods they couldn't explain. And that kind of connection is difficult to replace. This is why your soulmate's current happiness may actually be connected to the possibility of becoming emotionally honest with you. They are beginning to believe that maybe the story isn't finished. Maybe there is still something left to say. Maybe there is a conversation that never happened because both of you were waiting for the other person to make the first move. Maybe they have rehearsed what they would say if they ever had the courage to stand in front of you again. And what they want to say isn't complicated. They want you to know that they never stopped caring. They want you to know that their silence was not always indifference. Sometimes it was confusion. Sometimes fear. Sometimes pride. Sometimes they simply didn't know how to handle the intensity of what they felt. But now they are different. They have had time to think. They have experienced enough to understand what matters. And they are beginning to realize that the kind of love they once took for granted is not easy to find twice. Your soulmate may even be secretly checking on you in some way. They could be looking at your social media, asking mutual people about you, remembering old conversations, or simply wondering what your life looks like now. They may be curious about whether you have changed. They may wonder if you still think about them. And there is one question that keeps returning to their mind: would they still let me into their life if I came back honestly? That question scares them because they know you are not the same person you were before. You have grown. You have learned. You have developed boundaries. You understand your value now. And your soulmate knows that if they return, they cannot return with the same behavior. They would have to come with honesty. They would have to come with effort. They would have to come prepared to show you what they mean instead of simply saying it. This is where your story begins to take an unexpected turn. The happier your soulmate becomes, the more courage they seem to gain. They are no longer looking at your connection only through the lens of fear. They are beginning to look at it through possibility. And possibility creates movement. Something that was stuck can finally begin to move. Something that was silent can finally find a voice. Something that seemed impossible can suddenly feel worth trying for. But before anything happens externally, there is an internal decision being made. Your soulmate is deciding whether they are willing to stop running from the truth. And deep down, they already know the answer. They are tired of pretending. They are tired of wondering. They are tired of imagining what could have happened if they had been brave enough. Their happiness is not simply about having a good day. It is about finally feeling aligned with their own heart. They are beginning to understand that happiness doesn't always arrive when you get everything you wanted. Sometimes happiness arrives when you finally stop lying to yourself about what you want. And your soulmate is reaching that point. So if you have been wondering why the energy around this connection suddenly feels different, don't ignore that feeling. Something may be shifting emotionally. But remember, you do not need to chase the shift. You do not need to force a message. You do not need to prove that you are worthy of being chosen. Keep doing what you finally learned to do. Choose yourself. Protect your peace. Keep growing. Keep becoming the person you were meant to become. Because the most powerful thing you did was not something you said to your soulmate. It was something you finally did for yourself. You stopped abandoning yourself while waiting for someone else to return. And that changed everything. Your soulmate saw the difference. They felt the difference. And somewhere deep inside, they realized that the person they once feared losing was becoming the person they could no longer afford to lose. Maybe that's why they are happier now. Maybe for the first time in years, they can see a future that doesn't feel empty. A future where love doesn't have to be forced. A future where two people can meet again after becoming wiser, stronger, and more honest. And if their heart is truly moving toward you, the next step will not require you to chase them. It will require them to rise to the level of the love they once failed to understand. So breathe. Let go of the fear. Let go of the need to know exactly when or how. Your story is still unfolding. And sometimes the biggest transformation happens quietly before anyone else can see it. Your soulmate may be smiling today because something inside them finally makes sense. They may not know how to explain it yet, but their heart knows. They are happier because they finally understand what your presence meant. They are happier because they finally understand what your absence taught them. And most importantly, they are happier because they are beginning to believe that perhaps the door they thought was permanently closed was never truly locked. Perhaps it was simply waiting for both of you to become ready. And if this message touched something deep inside you, take it as a reminder, you don't have to chase what is meant to meet you halfway. Let your growth speak. Let your peace speak. Let your silence speak. Because sometimes the moment you stop asking someone to recognize your value is the exact moment they finally begin to see it. And now, my beloved child, there is something deeper you need to understand about this change. Your soulmate's happiness is not random, and it is not simply because life suddenly became easier. There is a reason their heart feels lighter, and that reason is connected to the decision you made when you finally stopped trying to control the outcome. You may have thought that walking away from the constant waiting meant you were giving up on love, but in reality, you were giving love room to breathe. You were giving both yourself and your soulmate the space to understand what was real. And during that silence, something happened that neither of you could force. Your soulmate began hearing their own heart again. For a long time, they were surrounded by noise. Other people's opinions, responsibilities, expectations. Fear, pride, and old wounds all made it difficult for them to recognize what they truly wanted. They may have convinced themselves that choosing the easier path would make them happier. They may have believed that if they ignored their feelings long enough, those feelings would disappear. But emotions don't always disappear simply because we refuse to acknowledge them. Sometimes they become quieter, deeper, and more powerful. And that is exactly what happened with your soulmate. The more they tried to move forward without dealing with what they felt for you, the more often your memory returned. Not always dramatically. Sometimes it happened through the smallest things. A familiar song. A certain place. A phrase someone said. A random moment when they saw two people laughing together and suddenly remembered the way you once laughed with them. They began realizing that their happiest memories were connected to moments when they felt emotionally safe. And when they searched their memories for that feeling, you were there. That realization surprised them. Because they had spent so much time trying to convince themselves that they were fine without you. But now they are beginning to understand that being fine is not the same as being fulfilled. They can function without you. They can continue their routine without you. They can smile without you. But there is a difference between simply living and feeling deeply connected to life. And something about you awakened that deeper part of them. This is why they may seem unusually peaceful lately. They are no longer fighting the truth inside themselves. They are not necessarily ready to tell everyone everything, but privately, they have stopped denying it. And that is a major breakthrough. Your soulmate is beginning to accept that they still have feelings for you. They are beginning to accept that they miss you. They are beginning to accept that the connection mattered more than they wanted to admit. But there is another realization coming, and this one could change everything. They are starting to understand that if they want another chance with you, they cannot approach you as the same person who walked away. They know you have changed. They know your patience has changed. They know your standards have changed. They know you have learned how to live without waiting for them. And that makes them nervous. Because they don't know whether you would still open the door. They wonder if too much time has passed. They wonder if you still care. They wonder if someone else has entered your life. They wonder whether the version of you they remember still exists. And sometimes these thoughts become so strong that they almost reach out. They type something. They look at the screen. They imagine your response. Then fear takes over, and they stop. But don't mistake Hesitation for a lack of feeling. Sometimes hesitation happens because the feelings are stronger than the person knows how to handle. Your soulmate doesn't want to make another mistake. They know that if they come back, they cannot come back casually. They cannot simply say, "Hey, how have you been?" and pretend nothing happened. They know there are unanswered questions. There are emotions that need to be acknowledged. There are things they need to explain. And most importantly, there is something they need to prove through action. This is why the next stage of this connection may feel slower than you expect. Before your soulmate makes an external move, they are making an internal one. They are becoming more honest with themselves. They are asking difficult questions. Why did I run? Why did I push this person away? Why did I pretend I didn't care? Why did I choose fear over honesty? And perhaps the hardest question of all, what if I lost the person I was actually meant to build something real with? That question has been following them. And instead of running from it, they are finally sitting with it. This is where regret begins to transform into maturity. Your soulmate is realizing that regret alone will not bring you back. They cannot change yesterday. They cannot erase the moments that hurt you. They cannot undo every confusing decision. But they can decide who they become from this point forward. And that is why their energy feels different. They are becoming more intentional. They are thinking about stability. They are thinking about commitment. They are thinking about what it means to actually show up for someone. They are realizing that love is not just chemistry. Love is consistency. Love is communication. Love is choosing someone even when fear tells you to run. Love is making the difficult conversation instead of disappearing. Love is protecting the connection instead of testing it. And these lessons are changing them. You may have wondered whether your soulmate ever understood the pain their actions caused you. The answer may be more complicated than you think. They may not have understood it at the time because they were too focused on protecting themselves. But distance gave them perspective. They began seeing the situation from your side. They began imagining what it must have felt like for you to receive mixed signals. They began wondering how many nights you questioned yourself because of their behavior. And that realization brought emotion with it. There may have been a private moment when they became overwhelmed thinking about what they had done. They may never tell you about that moment. They may never admit that they cried, felt guilty, or sat quietly thinking about you. But the emotion was real. And instead of destroying them, it became a lesson. Your soulmate is learning that some people enter your life to entertain you, some enter to teach you, and some enter so deeply that their presence changes the way you understand love forever. You are connected to that third category in their heart. You left an imprint. And no amount of pretending can erase an imprint created by genuine emotion. But there is something you need to be careful about. Do not turn this message into another reason to put your life on hold. Your growth is the most important part of this story. The moment you start waiting anxiously for a message, checking your phone every few minutes, or interpreting every small event as proof that they are coming back, you return to the same emotional place you worked so hard to escape. Your soulmate's journey is theirs. Your journey is yours. If they are truly meant to return, they must meet you where you are now, not where you were when they left. You don't need to shrink yourself to make them comfortable. You don't need to become less confident because they are afraid. You don't need to accept the bare minimum simply because you still have feelings. Your heart can love someone while your boundaries remain strong. Your compassion can exist without sacrificing your peace. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that. They are realizing that if they want access to your heart again, they have to respect the person you have become. That is one of the biggest reasons they feel happier now. They are no longer looking at your connection only as something they lost. They are beginning to see it as something that taught them how to become better. And that perspective changes everything. Instead of feeling hopeless, they feel hopeful. Instead of feeling trapped by the past, they feel motivated by the future. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" they are starting to ask, "What can I do differently now?" And that is the question that opens the door to transformation. There is also a possibility that someone around your soulmate has noticed this change. Someone may have commented that they seem happier. Someone may have noticed that they smile more. Someone may have asked why they suddenly seem more emotionally present. Your soulmate may have given a vague answer because they are not ready to reveal the real reason. They may simply say that life is getting better. But inside, they know there is more to it. Something about the thought of you has awakened hope. And hope can make a person feel alive again. They are beginning to imagine conversations with you. They are imagining what it would feel like to see you again. They are wondering whether the chemistry would still be there. They are wondering whether you would recognize the changes in them. They are wondering whether they could finally tell you everything they couldn't say before. And there is one confession that keeps getting closer to the surface: "I was happier with you than I realized." That sentence carries enormous weight because it means they are no longer comparing you to other people. They are comparing their current emotional life to the feeling they experienced with you. And they are noticing the difference. But perhaps the most beautiful part is that you didn't have to force this realization. You didn't have to convince them. You didn't have to compete with anyone. You didn't have to prove that you were better than someone else. You simply became more secure in yourself. And that changed the way they saw you. Sometimes the strongest attraction comes after the chase ends. Sometimes someone doesn't realize how deeply they value your presence until they experience your absence. And sometimes the person who once thought you would always be there suddenly realizes that your life continues whether they choose to participate in it or not. That realization can wake someone up. Your soulmate is waking up. And while you should never build your entire future around a prediction, you can recognize the emotional lesson here. The love you give yourself changes the kind of love you are willing to accept from others. If your soulmate returns, they will have to meet that new standard. If they don't, you will still have gained something priceless, yourself. You will still have your peace. You will still have your growth. You will still have the life you built while they were figuring themselves out. That is why you should not fear the unknown. You are no longer the person who needed someone else to validate your worth. You know what you bring to a relationship. You know what genuine effort looks like. You know the difference between words and actions. And because you learned those lessons, you are prepared for a healthier kind of love. Your soulmate may be approaching that same understanding. And if two people meet again after learning these lessons, the connection can feel completely different. The old cycle doesn't have to repeat. The old misunderstandings don't have to control the future. But first, there has to be honesty. There has to be accountability. There has to be courage. And your soulmate is slowly gathering all three. So if you have felt a strange calmness recently, don't immediately dismiss it. Maybe your heart is finally releasing the need to control what happens next. Maybe you are finally understanding that what belongs in your life will not require you to destroy your peace to keep it. And perhaps that is the exact energy your soulmate needed to feel. You stopped chasing them, and they finally had to chase the truth within themselves. You stopped demanding answers, and they finally started asking themselves the right questions. You stopped trying to make the connection happen, and they finally began wondering whether they were the ones who needed to make the next move. This is why their happiness feels so different now. They are beginning to see love not as something that takes away their freedom, but as something that can give their life deeper meaning. They are beginning to understand that vulnerability is not weakness. Commitment is not a prison. And admitting that they love someone does not make them powerless. It makes them honest. And perhaps, my beloved child, the biggest surprise is still ahead. The moment your soulmate finally decides that fear has cost them enough may be closer than you think. The moment they stop rehearsing the conversation in their head and actually decide to have it. The moment they stop wondering whether you still care and finally take the risk of finding out. Because the happiest they have been in years may not be the end of this story. It may be the beginning of the moment they finally understand why they were never able to completely let you go.